Ladies and gentlemen, it brings me a special pleasure to introduce our special guest for this evening. First, we have producer of Old Boy, Mr. Sid Lim. And of course, director Park Chan-wook. So producer Lim won't be staying for the Q&A, but he just wanted to say a few words.
안녕하세요. 아가씨의 공동 제작자인 임승용입니다. 올드보이를 만들고 뉴욕에는 그 주먹이 운다 때 왔었는데 이렇게 10년이 넘은 시간 후에 아가씨를 가지고 오게 돼서 대단히 기쁘고요. 즐겁게 보셨는지 모르겠습니다. 그리고 감독님한테 많은 응원 부탁드리겠습니다.
Hello everybody. My name is Sid Lim, producer on The Handmaiden. After having made Old Boy, first time I came to New York was actually with a movie called Crying Fist. Even after that, it's been 10 years since I've been to New York, but now I'm here with the film The Handmaiden. I hope you guys all enjoyed it, and I also hope that you guys give a warm support to Director Park for this movie.
Thank you. Well, it's been 13 years since Old Boy. You're probably a different person now than you were 13 years ago. So when you look at this film today, what do you feel? You know, are there certain things that you would have done differently? I mean, are you happy with the film the way it is? Has it aged well in your view? If you could share some thoughts.
영화 감독 입장에서는 이제 작품들이 하나하나가 다 자식처럼 느껴지거든요.
For a film director, all of his films feel like a child to him.
그런데 자식 중에 어떤 자식은 좀 좋은 집에 시집 가서 잘 사는 그런 자식들이라 하면 아주 가난뱅이가 돼서 힘들게 살아가는 자식도 있고 그렇습니다.
But it is with children that some of them end up getting married into a very good household and they live a long and happy life. Some go into a poorer situation and have to deal with hardship.
사이보그지만 괜찮아가 대표적으로 힘들게 살아가는 자식이라면 올드보이는 비교적 잘 사는 자식이죠.
If I'm a Cyborg, but that's okay, is a film that is probably representative of those children of mine who have gone into hardship. Old Boy is probably one of those who have gone into a more richer, better situation.
특히 올드보이는 외국에서 인기가 유난히 많은 작품이라 그런지 꼭 외국에 보낸 자식 같아요.
With Old Boy, especially, it is loved by so many audience overseas. Is that I feel like I married off a child to overseas destination.
어쨌든 잘 살고 있는 것 같아서 별로 걱정되지 않는 그런 자식입니다.
In any case, it's a child that I'm not so worried about because I'm sure she's doing well.
Well, also I'm a cyborg, but that's okay. I'm sure there's some fans of that movie in this house, right? Thank you. So is there anything else? Is there anything that you would have done differently with the old boy? Are there any parts of that film that you feel like if you're watching it today, hey, maybe I should have done this differently, or in terms of the structure and story or certain scenes?
예, 뭐 그럴 수도 있겠지만 그런 생각은 안 하려고 하죠. 그러니까 그 만든 시대에 그 당시의 저와 그다음 그 당시의 최민식과 유지태 그 사람들만이 만들 수 있었던 영화이기 때문에 그 당시에 최선을 다했고 지금 만들면 물론 완전히 다른 영화를 만들었겠지만 어떤 단점이 보완될 수는 있겠지만 그러면 아마 장점도 사라져버릴 거라고 생각합니다.
Well, it's possible to think that way, but I try not to think about that because I think that Old Boy is something that I could have only made back then with those people, with Chae Min-sik, with Yoo Ji-tae. It's something that only we could have made back in that particular time, and I had given it my all. I did my best, and if I were to do it today, if I were to make this film today, it would have been something completely different. But I do see, when I think about it, there are things that I could have improved on and whatnot, but just because it's something that could have been made back then, I want to leave it at that.
So I guess a lot of this is about the human nature and revenge and how destructive it is for everybody around. Do you feel that, is there any other way for the human beings to deal with issues and situations that are beyond their control and not to become a monster in really bad circumstances?
방식이 있겠죠. 제가 무슨 이제 실제 인생에 대한 이야기가 아니라 영화이고 어떤 특정한 상황에 놓인 특정한 사람의 대처 방식에 관해서 아주 과장되게 묘사해서 여러분께 보여드리려는 의도로 만든 영화죠.
Well, there probably are ways to deal with it rather than becoming a monster in the process. But this film isn't to do with everyday real life, but it's a movie and it deals with a very particular situation and a very particular way of dealing with that situation. So in depiction of it, there is an element of exaggeration.
저 자신이었다면 이런 상황에서 어떻게 행동했을까? 아마 올드보이에 나오는 두 남자 주인공하고는 아마 반대로 행동했을 거예요. 그렇지만 그런 얘기를 하려고 했던 게 아니에요. 이렇게 광기에 사로잡혀서 미쳐버린 사람들이 어떤 행동을 하는지 그걸 보여주고 싶었던 거죠.
But if it were me as one of those characters, what would I have done in those situations? I would probably have behaved in a completely the opposite way from any of the two characters. But that's the kind of thing I wanted to talk about with this film, and how much madness you can fall into you can fall into when you're dealing with the situation in a particular way.
복수라고 하는 것은 세상에서 가장 무의미한, 무익한 일에 가장 많은 에너지를 소비하는 그런 행동이잖아요. 그것은 오직 인간에게만 고유한 행동이고, 그래서 인간이 어떤 존재인지 알기 위해서 그 관찰하기 위해서 참 좋은 소재예요. 그런 관점에서 봐주시기 바랍니다.
The thing about revenge is that the human beings are very unique in being the only animals who would expend so much effort into something so useless, so pointless as revenge. And it is because of that, examining how humans behave when it comes to and want to take revenge, it's a very it tells a lot about human nature and human beings. So it was my hope that you would see the film from that perspective.
Since Old Boy was such a landmark film, not just for you personally, but also for New Korean cinema, in which ways do you think you have evolved and changed as a filmmaker since those days? And second part of the question is, how do you feel that the Korean film industry has evolved during that time? And what are some of the good things and bad things that have happened in the process?
저는 올드보이가 저한테 가져다준 선물이 여러 가지가 있지만 그 중에 하나는 이런 게 있어요. 올드보이에서 여자 주인공 딸이 이 비밀을, 이 진실을 모른 채로 영화가 끝나잖아요.
Well, when it comes to Old Boy, it has it has given me a lot of gifts in many sense. When you see the female character, the main female character in Old Boy, the daughter, she's the only one who is not privy to the whole truth, the entire truth, the secret.
그래서 영화가 끝났을 때 제 마음에 조금 찜찜한 것이 남았어요. 유일하게 여자 주인공이라고 할 수 있는 사람이 그렇게 진실로부터 소외된 채 끝나기 때문에.
And the film finishes without her ever finding out. And it has always made me quite troubled that the only main female character in the film is excluded from the truth.
그래서 다음 영화는 여자 주인공을 내세워야겠다라고 결심한 계기가 바로 그런 것이었고요.
It left a sour taste in my mouth, and it was the reason that made me decide that, well, in my next film, I'm going to have a strong female protagonist.
그래서 친절한 금자씨라는 영화가 만들어지게 된 겁니다.
And that's why you have Lady Vengeance.
그 다음부터는 계속해서 여자가 남자와 대등한 주인공 내지는 더 앞서가는 주인공 또는 박쥐처럼 비중은 좀 작아도 더 강한 캐릭터, 그 밖에 스토커나 지금 아가씨 얘기까지 계속해서 여성 주인공의 여성의 세계를 탐구하는 그런 영화의 길로 나가게 된 거죠.
That's why ever since that movie, I continue to place female in the role that's equal to the male characters in my films. Take first, for instance, the female character in that film. She might be she might be smaller in comparison to the main protagonist's role, but you might notice that she comes across as being the stronger. And I followed that up with films such as Stoker and The Handmaiden, where the films have a strong female protagonist, and in The Handmaiden, not just one but two.
그러니까 올드보이는 저의 남성 시대 마지막 작품이자 여성 시대를 열어준 계기를 제공한 영화인 셈이죠.
So Oldboy was the film that would draw the curtains on my era of masculine films, and have at the same time opened the next chapter in my series of my new era of female driven films.
한국 영화 산업은 그 이해가 뭐 많은 사람들이 얘기를 합니다. 그 한국 영화 산업의 어떤 절정기였다라고 그해 많은 영화들이 많은 그 오래 기억될 영화들이 쏟아져 나옵니다.
When it comes to the Korean film industry, around the time that Oldboy came out, a lot of people observed that Korean cinema was at its height, because around that time, many memorable Korean films had come out.
그의 살인의 추억이 나왔고 지구를 지켜라.
That year saw the release of Memories of Murder and Save the Green Planet, Scandal, Tale of Two Sisters. What else?
하여튼 좀 이렇게 지금 들으면 잘 믿기지 않을 만큼.
Anyway, when you listen to when you hear about all the titles that had come out then, it's almost unbelievable now to see they all came out around the same time.
그때는 감독도 감독이지만 제작자들이 굉장히 야심이 컸어요. 그래서 겁낼 만한 프로젝트에 서슴지 않고 달려들어서 어떻게든지 감독의 비전을 이루어 주려고 정말 그 뭐랄까 겁 없이 막 투자자들한테 막 소리 질러 가면서 그렇게 만들었던 때죠.
Not only the film directors back then, but film producers were very ambitious back then, and projects that you might otherwise think they would very hesitant about, afraid to make, they would not really think twice and jump at it, and it would attract a lot of daring financiers to those projects as well.
가장 쉽게 말하자면 살인의 추억은 범인이 잡히지 않는 형사 영화고, 올드보이는 아버지와 딸이 관계를 갖는 그런 스릴러 영화죠. 그렇게만 요약해봐도 얼마나 그때 제작자들이 무모했는지 알만할 겁니다.
Just as easy examples for you, Memories of Murder. Well, it's a story where the killer, the culprit, never gets caught. And Oldboy, it's a thriller where you see a father and daughter having sexual relationship. So, just looking at those sort of logline, you can see how brave the producers back then were.
지금은 좀 많이 이제 달라졌죠. 제가 스토커를 찍고 나서 한국에 와 보니까 한국에서 다시 영화를 찍게 돼 보니까 그 변화를 실감했는데 미국에서 겪은 이 환경이 한국에 그냥 그대로 와 있더라고요. 그 미국하고 비슷해졌더라고요. 어느새 박쥐 이후에 아가씨를 찍으러 와 보니까.
But the climate has changed quite a lot over the years, and after having finished Stoker, having gone back to Korea to do The Handmaiden, I could feel the change that had taken place in Korea, where the industry has changed to be very similar to the environment that you find in the States. So what had gone on in the States had made its way over to Korea already, and it's quite different even from the time I was working on first.
쉽게 요약하자면 스튜디오의 힘이 강해졌고 그다음에 유니언이 생겼고.
To sum up those changes, simply first, studio power had increased, and in that time saw establishment of unions in the industry.
그래서 영화가 뭐 좋아졌느냐 나빠졌느냐 아직 그렇게는 말할 수 없어요. 지금도 좋은 영화들이 만들어지고 있고요. 계속 새로운 인재들이 나오고 있기 때문에 이 변화에 어떻게 적응하느냐. 그래서 그냥 고만고만한 그 공장에서 찍어내는 것 같은 그런 영화만 나올 것이냐, 아니면 계속해서 도전적인 영화가 만들어질 것이냐는 뭐 더 두고 봐야 할 것 같습니다. 이제 과도기인 것 같습니다.
So whether the industry has come out of it for the better or worse, I can't really tell right now. Even now, there are good films being made and new talents constantly coming out of the Korean cinema. So it's the question of how you adapt to it, and rather than it being a question about how you adapt to it, it's a choice about what you're going to do in this new environment. Whether to make the kind of run-of-the-mill kind of films, or whether to continue to strive to try and make challenging cinema, challenging films. Which way the industry will go, it's really to be seen. At the moment, the industry is in a transitional period, I think.
아직도 한국의 젊은 재능이 계속 나오고 있다는 증거로 한 가지만 제시해드리자면 오늘 나온 영화 중에 비밀은 없다라는 작품이 있는데요. 그것을 보시면 제 말씀이 뭔지 아실 겁니다.
As a proof that there is as a proof that from the industry, still there are new young talents coming out of it. You should go and see this Korean film titled Truth Beneath, and if you see that film, you will see what I mean.
꼭 뭐 제가 각본에 참여했다고 해서 말씀드리는 건 아니에요.
Well, now I'm not telling you this just because I was one of the writers.
Do we have time to take some questions from the audience? Yes. Okay. Yeah. I'll run the mic.
Hello. What are some films that have influenced you? So old films that have influenced you and stuck with you over the years, and apart from the film that you just listed, what are some contemporary or new films that inspire you?
예, 언제나 히치콕, 로사와 베리만, 안토니오, 비스콘티 그런 이름이 있는데요. 비교적 덜 알려진 이름 하나 소개하자면 야스조 마스무라 얘기를 하고 싶네요.
Well, it's always Hitchcock, Kurosawa, Bergman, Antonioni, Visconti. But today I'd like to introduce you to a comparatively less known filmmaker, and his name is Yasumura Yasujo. Masumura Yasujo.
그리고 이게 박찬욱 영화와 무슨 관계가 있냐라고 의아하실 테지만 어쨌든 제가 정말 제일 좋아하는 감독은 사실은 한 명만 고르라면 나루세미키오.
And you might ask that, what has that filmmaker got to do with anything that Park Chan-wook has made? But if you ask me to pick just one filmmaker that I like the most, I would say Mikio Naruse.
그리고 요즘 영화 중에 전 요즘 영화 잘 보지 않아서 뭐라고 해야 될지 모르겠는데 하여튼 요즘에 본 영화 중에 제일 좋았던 것은 그거였어요. 그 랍스터.
Well, in terms of contemporary films, I don't tend to watch a lot of them, but so I don't know what to say. But of the ones that I've seen, the one I liked the most was The Lobster.
I noticed that Jo Young-wook's track "Farewell My Lovely" sounded a little similar to the main theme in Takeshi Kitano's Hanabi, and I was wondering if that was an influence, and if not, then what were some of your musical influences for this film?
그런 일이 가끔은 일어나는 모양이에요. 얼마 전에도요, 제 신작 아가씨의 음악 중에 하나가 다운턴 애비의 주제가 하고 똑같다라고 누가 그래서 깜짝 놀라서 들어봤는데 그 작곡가는 전혀 그 작품이 다운턴 애비가 뭔지도 모르고 있더라고요. 그리고 음악을 제가 들어봐도 이렇게 뭔가 분위기가 비슷해서 사람들이 그렇게 생각할 만하겠다는 이해는 되는데 음악적으로 흉내낸 건 전혀 아니었거든요. 아마 하나비도 마찬가지 경우가 아닐까. 하나비 음악은 잘 생각은 안 나는데 그러리라고 생각합니다.
Well, it seems that these things happen sometimes because not too long ago I had someone come up to me and say that in your latest film, The Handmaiden, one of the music from that movie is exactly the same as the main theme of Downton Abbey. And I was so shocked, and I actually went to when I listened to it, and I at the same time called Jo Young-wook and go, what happened? And he said, what's Downton Abbey? So he listened to the two music together, and I could see that it has a similar mood to it, and enough so that I can understand why someone may have felt that way. But musically, certainly, it's by no means did we try to mimic the theme from the Downton Abbey. Or musically, it is when you look into it in detail, it's quite different. But I think what happened with the Hanabi theme is probably similar.
So I noticed that some of the elements in your film are kind of similar to the avant-garde films. Is there some of the works from the avant-garde period that influenced you?
글쎄요, 그 상업 영화 치고 좀 그런 면이 보이는지 모르겠는데 제가 글쎄요. 많이 보진 않았고 제가 본 아방가르드라는 것은 다 세월이 한참 흘러서 말하자면 제가 말하자면 뭐 90년대에 본 60년대 아방가르드라면 그것은 이미 아방가르드라고 하기도 힘들잖아요. 그런 식으로 본 영화들은 있죠.
If not sure whether my film for what's supposed to be a commercial feature film has the avant-garde element in it. I'm not so sure, but I haven't seen that many avant-garde films to begin with, and those that I have seen only after a long time had passed since it was first released. So, for instance, it's the avant-garde films that I've seen may have been those that have been made in the 60s, but then I only ever got to see them for the first time in the 90s. But the thing is, when I've seen that film in the 90s, can you even say it's avant-garde anymore?
오히려 거꾸로 난 이렇게 말하고 싶어요. 내 영화에서 그런 그런 영향을 보셨다면 그것은 아방가르드의 영향이라기보다는요, 오히려 옛날 영화를 내가 많이 봤기 때문에 옛날 영화에서 받은 영향 때문에 그렇게 보일 수 있다라는 겁니다. 이건 역설 같죠. 근데 옛날 영화들 중에 어떤 걸작들은 굉장히 지금 영화보다 더 실험적인 그런 시도를 많이 했단 말이죠. 그렇기 때문에 그런 영향이 들어간 제 영화들이 오히려 아방가르드처럼 그런 면을 가진 것처럼 보일 수 있겠죠.
I would actually like to say it's the completely other way around, probably. If you saw some avant-garde elements in my film, it may be due to the fact that I've seen a lot of old films, a lot of classic films. This might sound like a contradiction, but when you see the old masterpieces and classic films, they were trying something new, more than the films today are doing. And there were a lot more experimental things that were being tried out back then than compared to now. So if you saw my films and you felt an influence of avant-garde, it's because I'm actually influenced by the old masterpieces.
그래서 제가 후배 감독들에게서 뭔가 독창적인, 뭔가 새로워 보이는 그런 영화를 만들려면 어떻게 해야 합니까? 라는 질문을 받을 때마다 이것이 역설적으로 들리겠지만 그러려면 옛 영화를 봐라, 오래된 영화를 보세요 라고 말하는 겁니다.
So when the young new filmmakers come up to me and ask me, how do you make something creatively unique? How can you make a new cinema? Then I answer by saying that well, this might sound like a contradiction and paradox, but go back and see those old movies, and you might find quite a lot from them.
젊은 감독들은 요즘 영화만 보니까 다 비슷해진단 말이에요. 아무리 뭔가 새롭고 독창적인 영화를 본다고 노력해도 어차피 다 비슷비슷한 영화만 보기 때문에 다 영화들이 비슷해지는 거예요.
The young directors are just watching films from, just watching contemporary films, which are very similar to each other because they're watching each other. It just ends up becoming all quite similar.
그래서 그래서 뭐 그렇습니다.
So was that enough of an answer for you?
We have time for one more question.
Thank you so much for coming. I had a question about Wu Jin, and I wanted to know if he found purpose or pleasure in seeking his revenge, and which is a stronger motivation or something like that.
둘 중에 골라야 한다면 쾌락을 따르는 거라고 생각합니다.
If I had to choose one answer for Woo Jin, he probably followed pleasure.
그것은 그 쾌락은 과정에 있는 것입니다.
And the pleasure is found in the process.
목적이 완성됐을 때는 허무만이 남는 것이고 그의 존재 이유는 그것을 추구하는 과정 속에 존재했던 거죠.
Once the purpose is complete, only thing you are left with is nothing. So his reason for existence was in the process of trying to take revenge.
We will continue our conversation with Director Park after the screening of Handmaiden, and also if you wanted to talk more about Old Boy, hope you get your tickets for tomorrow's screening of The Old Days, which is a documentary about the making of Old Boy. It has some archival footage from 2003 and some new interviews with the cast and crew, and also we're going to have a conversation both with director Park and the producer Sidlin. We're going to talk about their creative collaboration, because the Old Boy project, you know, Sidlin actually initiated it. He found the Japanese manga and he wanted to, you know, got an idea for that project. So I think it will be a very interesting conversation, and I recommend you get a ticket for Old Days. And thank you for coming.